So Terastallizing is the new gimmick coming in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, where you're able to actually change the typing of the Pokemon that you're using to a different type of one of the 18s. And this has some really potentially big implications on competitive play, moving from Dynamax to Terastallizing. I think it's really interesting to talk about, and I want to talk about why it could potentially be the best gimmick in terms of getting more inclusivity, in terms of including more Pokemon into the metagame. I think it has a lot of potential, so I want to talk about it here today. So what is going on, everybody? My name is Nico, and welcome back to another Pokemon video. I talk Pokemon stuff here on the channel. People have been requesting me get back into Pokemon stuff, but I also talk a lot of Nintendo Switch and Steam Deck stuff, so if that's your jam, make sure you are sub. But let's break down Terastallizing and why it's potentially the best gimmick. So before I go into the current gimmick and coming in Gen 9, I kind of want to break down the previous gimmicks in the older games, you know, those being Mega Evolution, Z Crystals, and Z Moves, and then Dynamaxing, because I think all of them are interesting and all have their own part to play. But I want to explain why I think that the Gen 9 gimmick, Terastallizing, is going to be the just most inclusive gimmick that they've added. For starts, I want to say that I did not play competitive Pokemon back when Megas and Z Crystals were a big thing. However, I do want to briefly, very briefly, talk about them. Obviously, I can't give my full opinion because I didn't play the formats, but I kind of just want to talk about, in terms of the inclusivity factor, I just want to briefly mention them. So let's bring up a Pokemon like, let's say, Alakazam. Alakazam works really well for this example, and we're going to give it the Alakazite. So I want to talk about Megas just very briefly. Megas were really cool, and they're favored by a lot of the community. A lot of people like Mega Pokemon in general. And I think it's a really cool feature. I think it was very cool in practice back in the day. The difference between this gimmick and the current gimmick being Dynamax is this only applies to certain Pokemon. Only certain Pokemon are able to Mega Evolve in general, so that really limits the number of Pokemon that are going to be able to utilize this gimmick as a whole. Z Crystals were a bit different, so if I throw on the, whatever it's called, the Psychium Z, okay, Z Crystals were a little different because every Pokemon could potentially use a Z move. And that was pretty cool. It added a lot more variety. A lot of Pokemon were able to utilize this a bit more. However, it took an item slot, and we do not know yet if Terastallizing is actually going to take an item slot or not. But this does take an item slot. It also has a specific move. It's basically a Dynamax move before Dynamax was a thing. So for these two things, they were very specific, and they, you know, potentially added a little variety. Z moves a little bit more than the Mega Crystals did, or the Mega Orbs, because only certain Pokemon could Mega Evolve and everybody could use the Z Crystals, but it didn't have as much an impact in terms of giving more Pokemon a variety of ways to play like Dynamaxing did. So moving into something like Dynamax, let's take a Pokemon like Venusaur, for example. Venusaur is one that was super well loved. You know, throw on like Sleep Powder, Earth Power, Leaf Storm, Chlorophyll, you know, the usual Venusaur stuff. Throw on all this fun stuff, okay? We don't need Protect, we want Sludge Bomb, or it doesn't matter for this purpose, okay? It doesn't matter. But Venusaur was a Pokemon that had a lot of variety simply because of the Dynamax feature. Obviously, it had a G-Max form, and that was one issue that I had with Dynamaxing. Was much like Megas, you had certain Pokemon that got different abilities through the G-Max potential that they had, which limited certain Pokemon. It was kind of silly. Every Pokemon could Dynamax, but some could G-Max, and it reminded me of the Megas, and I didn't really like that feature. It just didn't make a whole lot of sense. It made certain Pokemon very good. I remember very early on, Charizard was a favorite because, you know, doing that extra damage at the end was very good. Colossal is another one that comes to mind. But every Pokemon still had the potential to Dynamax. You know, if you think of Pokemon like Thundurus, why is it there? It is. Okay, Thundurus, Dynamax, very obvious. Other Pokemon that really like Dynamax, you know, Groudon, you know, that kind of stuff. You see a lot of that. Venusaur could Dynamax because of the Chlorophyll and because of the weakness policy potential. If you threw a weakness policy on there, you could also use it as a support Pokemon with Sleep Powder, with the, why can I not think of the item at this time? The Wide Lens. Why was that so hard to think of? Regardless, the Wide Lens. So there was a lot of potential whether or not you wanted to use Venusaur or not use Venusaur as a Dynamax potential. So Dynamaxing, I felt, added a lot more variety because more Pokemon were able to use it and have cool effects because of it. And I think that was really cool. However, Terastallizing is something that I think is going to be a lot cooler, because any Pokemon can Terastallize, and they could Terastallize into any of the 18 types depending on their Terra type, which is determined when you catch the Pokemon. I think this is really cool because it gives a lot of other Pokemon a lot of variety in terms of being able to change their stats and their type to give them an advantage that they didn't previously have. A Pokemon that comes to mind immediately, or right here sitting on the very top of the list, is Corviknight. Is a very bulky defensive Pokemon, and it's super strong with Body Press. Body Press is a really fun move that I used on one of my teams in Sword and Shield way back at the early times before Legends were even added. Body Press was super fun because of the really high defensive stat that you could get with Corviknight. Imagine turning this into a fighting type and then being able to go ahead and use Body Press with your high defense and then your stab that you get from Terastallizing. That is super cool. It's just a really neat little way to change a Pokemon and make it play in a different way. I think that is something that's very interesting moving into this potential format. Now, I want to say that a lot of people were concerned when they announced Terastallization that we were going to lose our stab from our original typing, that we were going to lose that stab, and that doesn't seem to be the case. They have not yet confirmed nor denied this. However, Central Leaks has something that is kind of interesting regarding the Terastallization. So over here on Central Leaks, it says that we originally thought that the stab was lost when changing to a different Terra type, but that's not the case. All stabs are preserved. So if we look at this Charizard here that they have as an example, Charizard then turns into a water type. It Terastallizes water type. We get the water stab while still preserving the 1.5 fire and 1.5 flying stab. Again, we come back over here, and this is a Terastallized fire type Charizard. Fire is then boosted from a 1.5 to a 2 stab, and then the flying stab is retained. So your original typing is retained, and this adds a lot of really cool potential moving into this format. So two Pokemon in particular that immediately come to mind. The first Pokemon that comes to mind is Regieleki because of Fake Out. Fake Out is super prevalent. A lot of people use it. It's so common in VGC especially. And with Regieleki, it hates Fake Out. It hates it because of Focus Sash. It absolutely despises Focus Sash. Well, the Fake Out, because of its Focus Sash, you lose it. If you get faked out, it's just a pain. And it's super good for speed control, like Electro Web, all that fun stuff, right? With this, we are now able to Terastallize into a Ghost type Pokemon. So change this typing to Ghost, and you now have a Ghost type Regieleki that cannot be hit by Fake Out. Not only do we not get hit by Fake Out, we still retain our Transistor, so we're getting the 1.5 multiplier, and we retain our 1.5 multiplier for our Electric Stab. So previously people were very concerned about losing, you know, the Electro Stab on something like a Regieleki, or losing whatever your stab was to avoid things like, you know, Fake Out. You don't have to worry about that anymore because you're actually going to retain it. So we still get the huge buff from Transistor, we still get the Electric Stab, and we don't take Fake Outs anymore on a Regieleki. That is something that's very big. Another Pokemon that comes to mind, again, I'm going to bring Venusaur back into the mix here, because Venusaur, if you're running an offensive Venusaur, you know, with Weather Ball or Earth Power, and then our, you know, stereotypical Leaf Storm or something, right? This Pokemon has a lot of different potential in terms of the Terastallization mechanic, because your main weaknesses are going to be fire. Fire here is going to be a big pain. However, you can Terastallize into a fire type with, you know, a Groudon or a Torkoal, whatever, Ninetales, whatever has Drought next to you, right? You can have Sun in play, get your Chlorophyll bonus, Terastallize into a fire type, and you're able to use Weather Ball. That would be super powerful, but then you got to think, oh, now I'm a fire type, I'm going to be weak to water type. However, because you're retaining your original grass stab, Leaf Storm is still going to do incredible damage. You're going to have your Chlorophyll bonus because the sun's out, right? You're going to be able, I'm just going to throw one in so, you know, we remember sun is in play. Drought. There you go. Ninetales is here using Drought. Because the sun's out, there's a water type on the opposing side of the field, and you still have access to Leaf Storm with that stab and Chlorophyll, you are still going to be able to do big damage and knock out that opposing Pokemon that causes a threat because you are now a fire type. You can get rid of that immediately, and that is just super cool. Now, there are a bunch of other things that just make sense in terms of the Terastallization stuff, you know, like just avoiding damage in general. So one that comes to mind for me is Colossal. This was super prevalent all throughout Sword and Shield because of Steam Engine. Super fun combo that a lot of people really liked using. We know it is coming back in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet because it was in the competitive breakdown trailer that they actually showed us. And they showed us this Pokemon Terastallizing into a water type, so that way it would take minimal damage from water type, which is, you know, super effective against it, 4 times super effective, and then it would activate Steam Engine because it was just a really cool tech that they were showing. And if you think back, you know, a lot of Pokemon were doing pretty significant damage to Colossal. You would have to Dynamax this Pokemon in order to avoid taking extreme damage and activating your weakness policy in your Steam Engine. But now we don't have to worry about that because we can just turn it into a water type, and that is something that's really cool. And I think Colossal is going to get a lot of play still because of this right there. This Pokemon now doesn't have to Dynamax to get that extra health and to activate the weakness pole. You can just turn it into a water type and make it not very effective and still get your Steam Engine off. And that kind of tech, being able to do that with a bunch of different Pokemon, not just, you know, Colossal, is going to be really cool. And it's not just like type changes specifically that are going to make, you know, these things really powerful. Another thing that they showed was something like Bullet Seed was being used. I believe it was called, I don't remember, let me look. It was the multi-dice that allows multi-strike moves to hit more than one time. And they showed this with a Breloom using Bullet Seed. Breloom using Bullet Seed with the loaded dice, and it terastallized into a grass type, getting a ×2 bonus stab to the grass type. That was super cool because you're going to get more out of those particular moves. There are only, you know, a handful of those moves that are actually viable, but this particular item plus the stab bonus that you can get adds a lot of different mechanics and tech that you could bring in and potentially have a lot of success. And I just think in terms of gimmicks as a whole, that Terastallization just adds a lot more variety to a lot of different Pokemon. It adds a lot of variety. Like, look at the ability Levitate, for example. Look at all these Pokemon that have Levitate. Levitate is going to be absolutely unreal with an electric Terastallization because your only weakness is ground, and now you cannot be hit by ground. You cannot be hit by a ground type. You Terastallize into a electric type, you're going to just be an offensive monster, especially with Pokemon that have already access to certain electric type moves. That is going to be extremely big for a lot of these Levitate users, and you're going to get a lot more use out of certain Pokemon like this. But it's just because of all of these insane combos that you just, and this is just without even testing the game. I think that when the game starts, when we start getting into competitive, things are going to be a bit messy. It's going to be messy, especially, you know, like we had with Dynamax, everything was Dynamaxing, but as we went into the formats, less things were Dynamax. You had certain Pokemon that you saw immediately come out into play, and you're like, that's gonna happen. You know, if there was a like a Thundurus, like I said earlier, certain things you just knew were going to Dynamax, but like things like Whimsicott you knew wasn't going to Dynamax, but like at the start of VGC in Sword and Shield, there was just goofy stuff happening because people were trying to figure it out. And that's going to be very similar with Terastallization, but I feel like it's going to be to a much higher degree because there's so many options with Terastallization. You're not just making your Pokemon big like you did with Dynamaxing. You're changing the type, and there's so many options available with Terastallization. It's going to be a lot messier than it was with the start of Sword and Shield, and I think it's going to take a lot more time between the launch and, you know, getting into competitive play for there to be a more solidified meta. Like, we obviously figure stuff out as we go with the competitive scene. However, because of the just the sheer amount of options, we can change the Pokemon to 17 other types from what it already is. You are going to have a lot messier start, in my opinion. I think it's just going to be the case. It's just going to be a lot more testing and messing around with stuff, seeing what works, and it's going to take a lot longer for there to be a more solidified metagame, and it's just going to be a lot broader, in my opinion. I think there's going to be a lot more going on in Scarlet and Violet's competitive scene than there was in other Pokemon meta games. I just think it's going to be really fun, and I'm really excited. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know where your head is at. Do you think this is a cool gimmick? Are you upset? Or do you want to see something else come back? Let me know all of your thoughts. I'm very excited to hop in and play with Terastallization. I think it's going to be really, really cool. But that is going to be it for this video, guys. Again, let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you want to see more Pokemon stuff from me in the future. Let me know in the comments before leading up to Scarlet and Violet, what kind of Pokemon content do you guys want to see? Let me know all that stuff. And if you found the video entertaining and helpful, make sure you're subbed. And then check out W. W is an energy drink, 0 sugar, 0 calories. Very good stuff. I love it. My favorite flavor is the Galaxy Grenade. It's like a watermelon lime. It's delicious. If you don't like energy drinks, try out their hydration flavor, strawberry banana. I freaking love it. Super good stuff, and use 10% off. Use code Nico, gosh, for 10% off. Check it out. It's really good. And if you want to see more from me, check out this video of me talking about if Scarlet and Violet is actually going to be good on the Nintendo Switch. The Nintendo Switch is getting old. Is this game going to be able to run that well on the system? Also, check out my Steam Deck stuff. Are you interested in seeing first impressions of a Steam Deck? Because this is the only competitor to the Nintendo Switch, in my opinion. So check that out as well. But like I said, that's it for this one. I hope to see you all in the next one. Peace.